This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome. So last week, Parshas Pinchas, we learned something on the Haftorah of Pinchas, which there are times we do lay in the Haftorah of Pinchas, but this year, Parshas Pinchas was what we call the first of the Gimel de Paranusa, the first of the 3 weeks of punishment. We know that the Haftorah that is lent every week was not really mandated by the Chazal. Chazal said you lay no Haftorah, but they didn't say what to lay. And it was up to the discretion of the Chachamim to choose an appropriate Haftorah, provided that it's connected to the Parsha, provided that it's a minimum of 21 psukim. But the most important Haftarahs of the year are actually the 3 Haftarahs of punishment of the 3 weeks, and the 7 of Nechama, and then the 2 of Tshuva, because these were legislated by Chazal themselves, to the point that if you miss one, if a tzibor misses one, they have to make it up. So for example, for whatever reason, they didn't lane the right Haftarah. Let's say last week the shul blew it. They lost the Ezra's Torah Luach, and they laned the Haftarah Pashas Pinchas. So you come to shul this week, you have to lane 2 prakim of Yirmiyahu. You lane Parak Aleph for last week and Parak Beis for this week. Okay, so one of the Yirmiyahu we know is the Navi of disaster, so to speak. He's the Navi that prophesied the impending Churban Beis HaMikdash. We're going to see why specifically he was chosen for this job. And Yirmiyahu actually cursed the day of his birth. Yirmiyahu, we have 5 psukim in Yirmiyahu where he curses the day of his birth. The reason he cursed the day of his birth is, what day of the year was he born? He was born on Tisha B'Av. Well, we have a pasuk in the Haftorah, Parak Aleph Pasuk Hey, B'terem et sarcha va'beten yidaticha. Before I fashioned you in the womb, I loved you. U'v'terem teitze merechem hikdashticha. And before you came out of the womb, I sanctified you. Navi lagoyim nisaticha. A prophet to the nations I have made you. So what is the Navi telling us? That before I fashioned you in the womb, I loved you. One individual who the Navi expressly tells us that the Rebbeinu Shalom loved him was Shlomo HaMelech. When Shlomo was born, the pasuk says, "Vayinachim David es Basheva ishtai." David consoled his wife Basheva. Vayavoy Eleh vayishkav ima. He was with her. Vateled bein. She gave birth to a son. Vayikra Shemai Shloimoi. He called his name Shlomo. Vashem ahevai. God loved him. We don't have that expression about others. Maybe about Avraham Avinu, where the Navi says Avraham Oyavi. Vayishlach bi'anosan hanavi. He sent word to the Navi Nasan. Vayikra Shema Yedidya ba'avor Hashem. He named him Yedidya because of God. Let me tell you another introductory remark about Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Yirmiyahu in Parak Chav, Pasuk Yadalid through Yirches, Yirmiyahu says as follows: Or hayom asher yuladati bai. Cursed is the day that I was born. Yom asher yuladasni imi. The day my mother bore me, al yihi baruch, should not be blessed. Or ha'ish. Cursed is the man. Asher bisar asavi lemar yuad lecha ben zachar. Cursed is the man who told my father, you gave birth to a son. Sameach simchahu. So in other words, Yirmiyahu Hanavi is cursing the day of his birth, cursing the one who told his father that he was born in Pasuk Yirches. Lama zeh merechem yatzasi. Why did I have to come out of my mother's womb? Leroy sa'amal v'yah, going to see toil and sorrow. Vayichlu b'voishes yamai, and my days were spent in shame. Based on the above, the Ben Ish Chai in his commentary Berchos Chaim says something incredible. He quotes the Arizal in the Pri Etz Chaim and Shar Kriya Shema that Yirmiyahu Hanavi was the Gilgal of none other than Shlomo HaMelech. Amazing idea. That Yirmiyahu was the reincarnate of Shlomo. And the reason is, it was from God, Umeyes Hashem hoysazoi shehaboyna beis hamikdash hu yisnabe al churban beis hamikdash. The one who built the temple would prophesy on the destruction of the temple. V'yechrav b'yamav, and it will be destroyed in his days. Why? Because Ikar Haftorah Yisbarach Hi Al Binyan Bayis Shlishi. When God told Shlomo about the Beis Hamikdash, the main promise was for the third Beis Hamikdash, Sheyibana, which is will come down from heaven. Now we know, it says about Shlomo HaMelech, he called him Shlomo and God loved him, and he called him Yedidya because of God. This is what Hashem tells Yirmiyah. I knew you before you were fashioned in your mother's womb. What did God mean when He told Yirmiyah, I knew you before you were fashioned in your mother's womb? I've seen you before. You're Shlomo HaMelech. Not only that, I've sanctified you. I loved you. Hashem is saying, Yidaticha, I loved you. How do I know that Hashem loved him? Because he's Shlomo, and it says about Shlomo, Vashem Ahevo. And even before you came out of your mother's womb, I sanctified you. Now listen to this. Yirmiyah cursed the day he was born. So did that klala accomplish anything? Was it effective? Did it devolve? No, it accomplished nothing. How's that? Because a klala can only be effective on something that's fertile ground for klala. But if it had already been sanctified before the klala took effect, so the klala has nothing to be effective on. So even though Yirmiyah cursed the day of his birth, but the klala did not accomplish anything because he had already been sanctified before he left his mother's womb. And now the klala cannot take effect because that day that he was born is like nothing because he had already been sanctified from the time of Shlomo HaMelech. And therefore, says the Ben Ish Chai, if you take the gematria of the word Yirmiyahu, and you take the gematria of Shlomo, Shlomo is 375, and you subtract 271, right? You get 375 minus 271 is what? 104. You get the gematria Manoach, peace. There you have it. So this is the pshat that Yirmiyah is saying. God tells Yirmiyah, before you were fashioned in the womb, I loved you. How's that? Shlomo HaMelech. Before you came out of your mother's womb, you were sanctified, and therefore your curse on the day of your birth was never effective. Okay, let's move on. Hashem tells Yirmiyah, Al tira mipneim, fear not. Ki ittecha ani, I am with you. But it could also be read, I am in you. To save you, says God. Says the Ben Ish Chai. What's his name? Yirmiyahu, with a vav. So that means most of the Shem Havaya is in his name. So he says, don't be afraid. Ki itcha ani, I'm with you. My name is in your name to guard you, says Noam Hashem, says the Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Wasn't Yirmiyahu put in prison?
Yes, he was. But luckily Hashem sent a man of color to rescue him. Okay? Let's continue. Just be careful here. So, number 7. Vayihi dvar Adonai elai lemor ma'ata royeh Yirmiyahu v'imar ma'kel shaked ani royeh. God says to Yirmiyah, what do you see? And Yirmiyah says, an almond branch I see, a blossoming almond branch. Vayomer Adonai elai tafta lerois kishoy kedani al dvari la'asosai. God said, you saw good, because I am being diligent and quick to bring my word to fruition. Then God says, Vayihi dvar Adonai elai sheni islemar ma'ata royeh voimar sir nafuach ani royeh ufanav mipnei tzafoina. He says, what do you see, Yirmiyah? And I saw a cedar, a boiling, bubbling pot, and it's faced from the north. Vayomer Adonai Eloi mitzafoin tipas achara al kol yoshevei haaretz. So Hashem said the evil will start from the north. So Yirmiyah sees two visions: a staff of an almond tree and a boiling pot. And for some reason, Yirmiyah did not want to go and give over the message of this prophecy, and Hashem said, no, you have to go. What was the meaning of the staff that was blossoming almonds? So by the way, Rashi says the meaning is, an almond takes 21 days to blossom, and this was a nevuah of the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim. But we're going to explore this further. And furthermore, what did Yirmiyah see with this bubbling pot?
Didn't the tragedy come from the north? The destruction?
Yeah, what does that have to do with the pot, though? Why a pot?
The pot is boiling. It's
Why a pot? What's the meaning of the pot?
It's bad.
How does a pot?
Things are boiling.
Maybe in your house, in my house, when I see a pot, it's a good thing. You know, I like the food that they serve.
It's gonna pop over.
No, you know, the louder the bubbles, the better the food tastes. You know, so where else in Tanakh do we find a staff blossoming with almonds? Aaron HaKohen. The Hashem says, everyone bring their staff into the entrance of the Mikdash, the Mishkan. V'haya ha'ish asher evchar b'ay ma'tehu yifrach. V'hashikoisi me'alayas tulanois me'is asher he'malinim aleichem. Where in Tanakh do we find a pot? Well, interesting. Yisro tells Moshe, now that I saw that the Egyptians were drowned, I see the greatness of God. Ata yadati ki gadol Hashem mikol ha'alekim ki v'adavar asher zadu aleim. In the matter that they planned came upon them. The Egyptians tried to drown us, and they were drowned. But the lashon that the Gemara says in Saita of ki v'adavar asher zadu aleim b'kedera shebishlu ba nisbashlu. In the pot that they try to cook us, they were cooked. How do we see in the word zadu a language of a pot? How do we know the word zadu is the lashon of a kedera? It says vayazed Yaakov nazid. So based on this, the Ben Ish Chai has a very interesting interpretation of the prophecy of Yirmiyahu. Look at number 12. He quotes the sefer Yad Yosef, which he said he didn't have a chance to look at length, only briefly. He says, I saw that he explains as follows. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, what are you seeing that you don't want to go? Because Yirmiyahu was reluctant to deliver the message. He saw something that made him hesitate. So the Rebbeinu Shalom asked Yirmiyahu, what did you see that you don't want to go? So Yirmiyahu says like this, I saw a makel shaked. You know what Yirmiyahu saw? What did Yirmiyahu do for a living? What tribe was he from? He was a Kohen. Min ha-Kohanim asher v'anasois. He was a Kohen. And the last time someone from my family had a stick, you demonstrated Rebbeinu Shalom when they challenged the kahuna of Aaron, so everyone gathered Pesach Hayom Mayit, and Aaron put a stick, and his stick blossomed, nobody else's stick blossomed, and the next day, what? They complain again. So what does the stick symbolize? That God's miracles are ineffective in the eyes of the people. So Yirmiyahu says, this is the sign you're showing me? To me this means that the people are going to be stubborn, and they give me a hard time tomorrow. That's why I don't want to go. So Yirmiyahu says, Makel Shoked, I saw the Makel Shoked, my grandfather Aaron. Koloimar, this nation are Kashim Lahamid, they don't believe anything. The last time Rebbeinu Shem you made an ice on the Kahuna, it says, and the next day they took the stick, and it was Hoitzi Parach, Vayotze Tzitz, Vayigmol Shkedim. There was a miracle. There were people who didn't believe. They said it was magic. They said it was sleight of hand. So what did Rebbeinu Shalom have to say? Okay, take the stick, put it in the Mishkan, and let it stay there forever. Why? Because there's a principle that magic only lasts for 12 hours. So if it was sleight of hand, then it would have faded after 12 hours. So what do you see from here? That a Navi can make a miracle, and people are not impressed. That's why Yirmiyahu says, I don't want to go. Because if the image that I'm seeing is the stick don't work. The stick only was working because he had to preserve it for beyond 12 hours. When I see this image of the blossoming almond tree, I remembered their stubbornness, that you needed to make a takana for their emunah, that the makel shaked should remain there forever. Therefore, I don't want to do the shlichus. How are they going to believe my shlichus? That I'm a Navi? Okay, so says the Ben Ish Chai, this is a very beautiful pshat in the first vision of Yirmiyahu, but with the utmost respect and request for forgiveness from the Kvod HaTorah of the Sefer Yad Yosef, I do not like his second commentary on the searing pot, on the pot, the bubbling pot, because he says that represents Moshe's anger, and therefore, says the Ben Ish Chai, I would like to offer another suggestion into what the bubbling pot means. Hashem said, what do you see? What else do you see that you don't want to go? V'oimar sir nafuach ani raya. I see a bubbling pot. I see engraved an image before my mind's eye, a bubbling pot. And the last time there was a bubbling pot in the Torah, you made it for Paray and Mitzrayim when you drowned them in the Yam Suf. Because we find that the drowning of the Mitzrayim in the Yam Suf is analogous to a pot, like it says, B'davar asher zadu aleim, and as the Gemara compares it in Saita to a bubbling pot. Now, what were the Jewish people's reaction when the Egyptians were bubbling in the Yam Suf? Did they believe or did they not believe? No, it says in Tehillim, Vayamru al Yam b'Yam Suf, they rebelled. They're maminim ve'ena maminim. When the Jews came out of the Yam Suf, they said, just like we went through the Yam Suf, the Egyptians went through the Yam Suf. So the last time you made a miracle of a bubbling pot, God, it didn't work.
That's Shiur. Egyptians were killed. What do you mean it didn't work?
That didn't work when they came out of the Yam
They
Suf.
weren't chasing them anymore, and they sang Shiur.
Yeah, after they saw them dead, they sang Shira. But before they saw them dead, they said, I don't believe God made a miracle for us. The same way He split the sea for us, He made another path for the Egyptians. It says, Vayamru al Yam b'Yam Suf. It says the Jews were Miktane Amana. They said, Kashem sha'anu oilu mitzad echad, kach mitzuyim oilu mitzad acher. Until Hashem had to command the minister of the Yam that he should expectorate the Egyptians and they would see them dead. So when Yirmiyahu said, I saw a boiling pot, I remembered the boiling pot of the Mitzrayim that was in front of the eyes of all of Israel, which was a great Pele. V'im kol zeh hayubay panim. Look in the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, in 7, Upanav mibnei tzafayna. They were panim here, meaning they were different. There was still a take on it. They weren't convinced that it was an authentic miracle. Now, where did this other way of looking at it come from? Mibnei tzafayna. V'im kol zeh hayubay panim perush tam ve'emes la'is. Mibnei tzafayna. Tzafayna is the lashon of the Yetzer Hara, who's called Tzafayni. Like it says, V'es ha-tzafayni archik me'alechem, the Navi Yoel says. We have it here on the sheet in number 11. One of the things that the Yetzer Hara is called is the Tzafayni. V'es ha-tzafayni archik me'alechem. The Yetzer Hara is called the Tzafayni. So, Yoel, Yirmiyahu is saying, despite the fact that you made a bubbling pot, the Jews didn't believe in it. They try to explain it with various false interpretations, that just like we're going on one side, the Mitzrayim are not being completely cooked, they're coming out on the other side. So if they didn't believe in the stick of Aaron, Yirmiyahu says, and they didn't believe in the pot of the Yam Suf, why are they going to believe in me, says Yirmiyahu. So now the question is, so how did Hashem address these two concerns of Yirmiyahu? So this is the final paragraph. V'amar lai Hashem Yisbarach, the Blessed One be He said, Al Hamara Harishain, regarding the first image, that you saw the staff of Aaron, you saw good, because I'm being diligent about my word. Roit Saloimar, meaning, Zeh Hamara Shal Makel Shoked, this image of the blossoming almond staff, Asher Netzar Le'inecha, that you envisioned, is not like Kadesha Tizkar Makel Shoked Shal Aaron Zakenecha. I showed you the blossoming almond staff, not for you to remember the staff of your grandfather. And now that you should be afraid that just like they didn't believe it then, they're not going to believe it for you. Loichein, 2 lines down. This image was shown to you to allude to my word. Hudvar ha-paranos, the punishment that which you prophesy about. Shoyked ani la'asoisai, I will be diligent to carry it out, and it will not take long. And regarding the second image of the bubbling pot, Hashem Yisbarach said, this image that you engraved before your eyes, it was not to envision the small emunah of the Jewish people when they saw the boiling, bubbling pot of the Egyptians in the Yam, but rather to show you the paranos that is in store for Klal Yisrael now. Hineni kairei l'chol mishpachas ma'am l'chol safina, that I'm going to summon the nations from the north, namely Babel, to punish the Jewish people. But this is a very interesting interpretation, firstly, of what the Rebbeinu Shalom means when he tells Yirmiyahu, I loved you from the womb, I sanctified you from the womb, because you're really Shlomo HaMelech, and A, I loved you from before, and B, the klala that you cursed the day of your birth will be ineffective, and 2, the vision of Yirmiyahu of the flourishing almond tree, which sort of reminded Yirmiyahu of the Jewish people's rebellion even after the flourishing of the staff of Aaron, and the bubbling pot, which represent the bubbling Yam Suf, which the Jews did not believe in God even after that particular miracle. Okay, so these are just some thoughts on the Haftorah, the first week of the Gimel de Parnusa.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.